Hello and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to the summary of foundation Fabs Flushes 2020. I have enjoyed myself so much throughout the summer, and it seems like you've enjoyed this series as well. Thank you so much to every single one of you who has watched this series, who has watched one of the videos, and a special thanks to all of you who have joined me in the live chat when the videos have premiered. Let's get started, let's get into it. If you would like to find out what are the fabs and what are the flushes of the foundations that I have tested out throughout the summer this year, then just keep on watching. I'm just going to remind you all the foundations that I have tested out. The first week we had two foundations from a new brand, XX Revolution, and I tested out both the luminous, the glowy foundation and the matte. I then followed those two with Pure 4-in-1 Love You Selfie foundation. We then had ELF Flawless Finish foundation, BareMinerals Original foundation, NYX Born To Glow, KVD True Portrait, Maybelline Fit Me Matte and Poreless, and lastly Smashbox Studio Skin Full Coverage 24-hour. As you can probably see, I did do some notes, and I did exactly the same thing as I did last year, which is categorize my findings into 3 categories: the coverage, longevity and finish, and within that category the foundation could score up to 5 points. The more points the better. Okay, in the first week, like I said, I tested out 2 foundations. I'm going to focus on the Double Fix, which is the matte one, first. In the coverage department, I scored it 4 because it was reasonable. It was more of a medium, but it builds nicely. I scored it a 3 for longevity, purely because even though it looked beautiful on camera, it separated when I looked closely. A lot of my oil kind of broke down the foundation. However, it did hold quite well, so that's why I scored it a 3. I gave it a 3 for finish because it was quite a good coverage. However, I could see my texture. It did not smooth my skin at all, and it was pretty dry looking. It wasn't my favourite. Let's move on to the second foundation I tested out that day, and it's the Glow Skin Fix. I gave it 3 for coverage because after powdering it, it went from like almost a high coverage to a solid medium. For some reason, I kind of lost a bit of coverage. The foundation does promise medium coverage, which is fine, and 3 is not a bad score. 3 for longevity because obviously it is a glowy foundation. I have glowy skin. I did have to blot throughout the day, and it came off when I was blotting. And then the finish is like very glowy upon application. Too glowy almost for my liking, but when I powdered it down, I actually really liked the finish. I preferred the finish of the glowy foundation powdered down than I did of the Double Fix by itself. The second week I did test out the Pure 4-in-1 Love You Selfie foundation. I had a lot of high expectations when it comes to that foundation because Raw Beauty Christie, who I admire and I've admired for a long time, loves that foundation. However, she does have a dry skin, so it's a whole new world when you have a completely different skin type. That foundation lasts on her so well. It unfortunately does not last on me. The coverage of this foundation is so good. It's like a solid high coverage pretty much straight away. Actually smooths your skin reasonably well. I gave it a 5 for coverage because it looks so nice. I do prefer to apply this with a sponge because a brush applies a very thick layer and it does look a little bit cakey. For longevity, because I have oily skin, it becomes very movable, it transfers, it comes off, so it just rubbed off a little bit too quickly for my liking. However, again, 3 is not a bad score. 4 for finish because I loved it. That initial application, it looks beautiful. Unfortunately, it does get creamy quite quickly. The warmth of my face, you can just feel how creamy it's getting. So I did powder it down, and it still looks beautiful when it's powdered down. So overall, this foundation would be like a dream if it lasted a little bit longer. At the end of week 2, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the worst Fabs or Flushes ever. However, we had a small gem at week 3, and it is the e.l.f. Flawless Finish Foundation. The only issue I had with that foundation, with the coverage of that foundation, is that I had to apply 3 layers to get it where I want it. It did get to a high coverage, which is fine, which is why it's got a 4. It's just the fact that I had to build so much. However, on the plus side, even though I had 3 layers on, it did not look cakey. By layer 3, you could feel it on the skin, but it wasn't as bad as you'd expect. I gave it a 4 for longevity, and I did need to blot. However, it held throughout the day quite nicely, and it wore off in a very nice even layer. And I gave it a 4 for finish, so it was 4, 4, 4. The reason why I gave it a 4 for finish was because it was nice and smooth, but on the flip side, it did not set by itself. I did have to use powder. Week 4 was very exciting because for the very first time ever, I tried not only a mineral foundation, but a powder foundation. And it was the BareMinerals Original Foundation. Couldn't decide whether to give it a 3 or a 4 for coverage because it really is one of the strangest coverages ever. It does range from light to almost a full, depending on how you apply this foundation. To me, like a solid medium, if you build it, it's a solid medium verging on a high coverage. Again, I struggled to give it a score between a 3 and a 4 for longevity, as the side where I didn't reapply throughout the day was red pretty quickly, and especially at the very end of the day, you could really see that I had foundation missing on a lot of my face. However, the side where I did reapply, it did not look cakey, it looked flawless, and I could really just keep reapplying it throughout the day. 3 applications worth on one side of my face, and it didn't look heavy. It looked really nice. It felt really comfortable. And finally, for the finish, again, I struggled between a 4 and even a 5, because strangest aspect of it all is that it genuinely looks like there's highlighter in that powder, not like a blinding highlight. It's like a glow from within, but obviously because it's a foundation and you're applying it all over your face, there's like an overall all over the face highlight. The texture of the powder feels like it's like almost a wet powder. I don't even know how to describe it. For a person that does not like powder, I hate powdering my face. That foundation, it feels nice on the skin as a powder, and I cannot wait to try the matte version as well. The next foundation is the NYX or NYX Born To Glow foundation, and again, I struggled to give it a good score for coverage. However, I'm leaning more towards 4 than a 5, purely because upon application it was more of like a light medium coverage, and if I remember correctly, the description said medium to full. It did get to a very good high coverage. However, I did have to build it, but that's not a bad thing. Like, sometimes it's better to build your coverage gradually, and there's a fly in my room and I'm gonna kill it in a minute. Longevity wise, it rubbed off so well. The 10-hour mark, it wasn't that bad. It did rub off. However, again, it rubbed off evenly. The one thing that I absolutely adored with that foundation was the finish, because yeah, it was very glowy without the powder, but once I powdered, it looked so nice and smooth, almost as if I used a primer underneath it. Anyway, KVD True Portrait foundation. I have waited to test that out for a long time. It did not impress me. However, I did give it a decent score. For coverage, I gave it a 4. It's more of a light medium coverage. After building, it's a solid medium. However, that's what KVD has written on their website. I can't expect a foundation to go any more than medium coverage if that's what the brand wants the foundation to do. The only reason I didn't give it a 5 was because you're kind of sacrificing a lot of the foundation for the sponge to soak it up, and they do say you can use a sponge. For longevity, I actually didn't write anything, but I gave it a 3, and that is because the foundation said to be oil controlling, but at our number 2 I was shiny. Like, it was a matte foundation, it is a matte foundation, but for it to be so shiny at our number 2, where's that oil control, you know? I followed the KVD True Portrait foundation with the Maybelline Fit Me Matte and Poreless, which I heard so many good things about, and unfortunately it has disappointed me so much. Again, if any of these foundations work for you, carry on using them. That's absolutely fine. This isn't me saying you shouldn't be wearing these foundations. I'm glad you got your money's worth. I didn't, especially with this one. For coverage, I gave it a 3 because it was definitely light coverage. It wasn't even a medium, really. You could kind of build it to a medium coverage, but again, a little bit like the Kat Von D, it ate up quite a lot of foundation with the sponge. However, not like Kat Von D, it did work well with a brush. I actually do prefer a brush for this foundation. I gave it a 2 for longevity. It did not hold onto my skin, it was not oil controlling, and it promised to be. I even gave it a second try for another day because I did wear a face mask and it rubbed off, and I thought it was my fault, but it really wasn't, because the foundation is not transfer resistant. It came off. The most important aspect is that foundation broke me out twice, so that's why I definitely wouldn't recommend it, because I just have a bad experience with it. Again, I know it's a lot of people's favorite, so carry on using it if it's good for you. And lastly, last week I tested out the Smashbox Studio Skin full coverage 24-hour foundation. Again, I had high hopes because I did actually quite like the original Smashbox Studio Skin. However, I remembered that it oxidized on me quite a lot. It was the wrong shade, so this time round I bought a lighter shade. Turns out that this was even more mismatched. I would have probably been better off buying the same shade I had previously. This one does not oxidize nowhere near as much as the Studio Skin, the other one. I'll just put it on the screen now. For coverage, I did give it a 4 because it was full. Almost immediately with a sponge even, I did not like it because it applied it in a very thick layer. It looked very heavy. It works so much better with a brush, and you can apply it in a small area, tiny little bit, and buff it in. It looks so much better that way. Again, a sponge just applies, like, just slaps it on, and like it draws all that moisture from the foundation, and it sticks awkwardly. For longevity, unfortunately, I did give it a 3 because it separated almost immediately. It actually sat on my skin quite awkwardly, and I gave it a 3 for finish, again purely because it wasn't my favorite. It wasn't smoothing. It looked very powdery, and that made it very like porous. It highlighted my texture, and you would definitely need to use a smoothing primer with this foundation. The one thing that I would like to say about this foundation is the fact that it is most certainly transfer resistant and water resistant, because the day that I tried it, I did go out, I went to a shop, and obviously I did have to wear a mask, and it rained that day as well, so I would have had some of the foundation missing around my forehead, but I didn't. I did have a mask, and even though some of the foundation rubbed off, not as much came off as I would expect it to. So it definitely is water and transfer resistant, which I actually really like. Okay, not much left, I promise. Let's conclude all of these. In order, when it comes to the scores that I gave, NYX is number 1. I loved the finish. I actually didn't mind how it wore off throughout the day. It was quite a long-lasting foundation. The second one is BareMinerals, purely because when I did reapply it throughout the day, it looked beautiful. Even though I lost coverage, I could easily reapply it. The only reason I don't reapply throughout the day with any other foundation is because that I usually have powders on top of my foundations, and if I were to put another liquid on top of that, it would be a disaster. Third place is one of my faves from this year, Pure 4-in-1. Again, I love this foundation. It would definitely be number 1 if it wasn't for longevity. I'm wearing it today, and you can probably even see throughout the video that I started off with pretty much a matte face, but I have sheen in the center of my face already. I have been filming for like 45 minutes, almost an hour. It does go quite glowy quite quickly on my skin. KVD True Portrait is number 4. Elf was number 5. 6th place Smashbox. XX Revolution Matte is 7th. Glow is 8. And at the very end we have the Maybelline Matte and Poreless. Overall, the most long-lasting foundations are the NYX or the Elf one. The NYX looked a lot nicer throughout the day. Elf kind of rubbed off in a similar way. They all kind of evenly came off. The best coverage, hands down, Pure 4-in-1. Pretty much a high/full coverage upon first application. You don't need a lot of it. It looks beautiful. The nicest finish, 100% Pure 4-in-1, or if you want to combine it with longevity, the NYX. Overall the best, NYX, hands down, and overall the worst, Maybelline Matte and Poreless. That is the end of Foundation Fabs or Flushes 2020. It has been a wild ride, especially because of what's happening this year, but it was very fun. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and I hope you are ready for Foundation Fabs or Flushes 2021, because I am. I'm definitely not stopping with foundation wear tests. You can expect pretty much at least one foundation wear test every single month. That's kind of what I do. I love it. I love foundation wear tests, and I hope you like them too. If you do, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy all the videos that I put on the playlist for you. If you have not seen the Foundation Fabs or Flushes 2020 yet, go and watch the videos. Thank you so much for watching. You are the best, and I hope to see you next time.